Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would like to continue on with the wonderful viewer questions that you so very kindly submitted to this channel a few months back. And that brings us to the next great question from Cheap Cinema Channel. So hello, Cheap Cinema Channel. I very much hope that this video finds you well. And you ask, how do you feel about the excessive use of CGI effects? I can't understand why people are impressed with them. I think they almost never look good. I prefer even low quality practical effects to CGI. Starting to feel like I'm the only one who feels this way. Okay, thank you very much for the question, and I can sense the feelings that you have towards effects in general, and you mentioned practical effects or computer generated ones, etc. So thank you very much for this. I can say that it really depends. It really depends, and I grew up in the 80s, and I was part of what one might call the VHS generation of sorts. And so part of that was watching a lot of science fiction and horror films that were available on video to watch through VHS rental stores, etc. And as you know, a lot of those films, or in fact all of those films, relied on what are known now as, say, practical special effects. And I think the word practical is being applied here. And we can use that in hindsight, because at the time there was not a type of mainstream industry, shall we say, of computer related or computer-based generated effects that is now perhaps a very common thing among, say, mainstream film releases, for example, Hollywood films. So it's not to say that there weren't any computer-generated images. There certainly were. There are some really famous examples that one could cite, maybe from the 80s or so. For instance, a very famous sequence in the film Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, comes to mind, which was then borrowed for a certain sequence in the following film, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. But in any event, the general reason why I start the answer in this way, or my response in this way, is that I grew up in this era and watching films from this era, so I already have a type of, one might call maybe inherent bias, perhaps, because I really enjoy that type of what is now known as practical special effects. I really do enjoy it when I watch it. And I was reading those magazines too, like Fangoria magazine, and they would be talking about the special effects artists. And I remember there was one period in my life when I was a kid, and the people at school asked, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said as a kid, I want to be a special effects artist, because it would be like Tom Savini or someone to be like that, and just coming up with these inventive ways of creating some kind of special effect on screen, this type of movie magic. Wow, incredible stuff. And so I love that as a kid, and I love that now. So when it comes to what your question is, CGI, or computer-generated effects, or computer-related based effects, I don't have anything against computer graphics or computer-generated effects at all. On the contrary, if it's done well, or if it's done in a way that I can go along with it, I can accept the so-called movie magic, I think that's wonderful. I mean, there is, of course, the possibility of something, the join, right? The join between the the generated image or the generated component of the frame and what is being shot on the set at the time, or on location, or in camera, and how well that component is joined up with the rest of the environment of the shot, right? So I understand that concept, maybe just on a very general level. I'm not an engineer or software expert by any means. So when I say I understand it, perhaps I should say I don't understand it, but I just maybe can sense it on a very maybe visceral level from the viewpoint of a consumer. So, but what's my point? Oh yes, so there's this idea of how real does it look, the join between the effect part and the rest of the part. So, and that might be an issue when it comes to, say, computer-generated effects of the modern age. However, I should say too that issue, I also understand, is part inherent of the special effect itself. In other words, the special effect has always had this challenge of how well it can be integrated into the shot, or how well it can be blended in to the movie magic, the illusion, as it were, how well the illusion can be pulled off, and what is the success of that particular illusion. And so I would say that type of challenge has always existed, regardless of whether it's a practical effect or it's a computer-generated effect. Now the question arises is when you watch something that maybe is relying on computer-generated effects, how well do you feel you are being, say, swept up in the illusion of the particular scene or sequence, or how much of the movie magic do you feel is very much alive when you watch it? And I would say too that when I watch a film, even one with practical special effects, generally speaking, I don't, maybe I look at something and maybe somewhere in the back of my mind I can understand that, oh, this isn't real, this isn't happening. I can understand, maybe I feel that way, and so I never looked at it necessarily as I needed to believe it per se, but just as part of the spectacle of the piece. If I could go along with it and I could be just swept up by it in those terms, then I could find. So in other words, I could see something that was fantastic and not necessarily real, but still be part of go along for the ride. And so I think that's the case too for computer generated, or CGI for me as well now. I can go along with the fact that this is obviously not real in the sense of my own perception of reality in my own life, but I can go along with it because this is the environment of the film that the whole film has set up from the very get-go, hopefully, from the start of the film. Okay, so, but ultimately too, it depends on one's tastes. So I can say, for example, that I have seen some examples of great CGI work in films, really, really great examples. And I've seen some examples where maybe it's, for my tastes, maybe it's a little bit not so good. The same thing is true for practical effects as well. I've seen some examples of practical effects that are really outstanding, shining stuff. And then I've seen some other examples that are pretty so-so, right? Or something like that. So it really depends, right? It really, really depends. I can understand too that for some people, one has a preference for one over the other, or vice versa. That's also fine too as well. And I also understand too that one of the interesting points is how well practical effects within a film age over time. One could make the argument that I think one of the key philosophical concepts of special effects, practical or CGI or otherwise, that I think a really good special effects artist will try to incorporate to the best of that artist's ability is not just the effect itself, but how well the effect will hold up over time. And this is a really difficult thing, I think, from an artist's perspective. And so if it's done well, that means you can watch a film that is many, many years after it was initially released. Still, the phrase is, it holds up And that has a lot of import to it. And so this is one of the inherent things. And I think this is true, again, from practical effects perspective. This is also true for computer graphics, or computer generated, excuse me, CGI images effects perspective as well. So I understand that the concepts are the same. It's just maybe a matter of, say, different tools being used. But again, if the concepts and the philosophy is the same, then ultimately it is how well those tools are being employed. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then there are many examples of the other tools that are being employed in other films that I hope you will find much enjoyment in. Because as I say, the great examples will hold up, right? Because that's why they are great. So Cheap Cinema Channel, I'm very sorry if my response has not my response is not to your satisfaction, and please accept my apologies for that. It is a really wonderful question, and you say that you know, maybe for you the CGI almost always doesn't look good. But that's okay, right? That's totally okay, because you can still hold on to those great examples for practical effects that I hope that you continue to celebrate and to watch and love and admire and appreciate. And because I'm with you there as well, because I know that there are many of those great examples throughout cinema, and they will still be watched time and time and time again. So my dear friend, thank you so much for the question, and I hope this video finds you well. And so thank you once again, and until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.